dear respected Thai, dear brothers and sisters, dear Sangha, dear friends. Today is the 21st of May, and we are in the Stillwater Meditation Hall of the Upper Hamlet during the spring retreat. Today is a beautiful spring day, isn't it? Did we notice the sunshine, the fresh air, the green grass, the blue sky, the flowers blooming? The happiness that is available on such a day. And to be together for a day of mindfulness is a great happiness as well. For the Sangha at Plum Village, we have a chance to be together and practice together and generate this energy of mindfulness. And for our friends who come for one day, it's still an opportunity to experience this energy of mindfulness. And for our guests who may be here for the weekend or for 1 week or longer, and for our lay residents, we appreciate this precious opportunity to be in an environment where we all like mindfulness. We see the value and the benefits of practicing mindfulness with others. At Plum Village, we have often said that Plum Village is the land of the present moment, where we learn to live in the here and now. Maybe when we arrive, we don't exactly know how to live in the present moment. It's quite new, but it's possible. The Buddha offered teachings in many ways and to many different kinds of people. He even wrote poems. And there's one very beautiful poem about the present moment. I think we know this poem. It is, "Do not pursue the past. Do not lose yourself in the future. The past has already gone, and the future has not yet come." Looking at life deeply in the here and now, the practitioner dwells in stability and freedom. To wait until tomorrow is too late. So the Buddha was reminding us, don't procrastinate. Don't say, "I'm too busy, I'll practice tomorrow." No, he said, looking at life deeply in the very here and now, we can live with stability and freedom. So when practicing and living at Plum Village, we have this opportunity to develop our capacity to look deeply. To look deeply. We can look deeply into ourselves. We can look deeply into friends we're practicing with. There's really no limit to our looking deeply. We have the opportunity to learn how to live deeply in the very here and now. And we also have the opportunity to learn how to love deeply. And it's love in the sense of the 4 immeasurable minds that the Buddha taught to develop our capacity to have kindness, compassion, to feel joy at others' good fortune, and then equanimity or non-discrimination. Thai has talked about the mind of love as our bodhicitta. We learn how to love others in the sense of wanting to protect them, to help them on the path of practice, to inspire them. Of course, we have different lifestyles. For monastics, we also are developing our capacity to build the Sangha and have brotherhood and sisterhood. For our lay practitioners, you have the capacity to develop families, to have partners, have marriage, children, and offer a new generation for Mother Earth. So in the practice of coming back to look deeply, we know that man has been so curious about the universe in which we live. This curiosity has led to many scientific inventions. For example, there's been the aspiration to explore space, to explore the universe, the stars, the galaxies, the cosmos. So we have immense telescopes that now can probe the depths of the cosmos. And they are immense. The largest one, I believe, now is in the Canary Islands in Spain, but also Peru and other countries. We have the curiosity to probe the depths of the ocean and look deeply into the ocean. And there are submarines now that can travel 33,000 feet under the surface of the ocean to look deeply what's there. We have the curiosity to look into our own body. So we know science has developed the capacity to enable us to see what's inside of us. You know, first there was the development of the X-ray, and then we know there's the electroencephalogram, electrocardiogram using electricity to show us the actions of our heart and the brain, but even more sophisticated means now with electronic microscope, ultrasound, magnetic resonance imaging, something MRI. It's possible to look at the blood flow within the brain now. So the capacity to look deeply is available with instruments. But if we want to look deeply into ourself, what is our instrument? Our instrument is ourself. And maybe we need a little bit of preparation to be able to use ourself to look into ourself. And the preparation has been called stopping, samatha. So when we come to Plum Village, maybe we've been traveling full speed ahead, going very quickly, being, of course, efficient at work, but having to multitask, perhaps, or drive at the same speed as everyone else on the autoroute, 130 kilometers an hour. So we come here and we can learn how to slow down and even stop. So when we hear the sound of a bell, the clock in the dining room, the telephone, we're preparing ourselves to stop so that we can look deeply. These moments of stopping are very relaxing. to the brain, to the mind. And when the mind is calm, then it's much easier to look inward, to have vipassana, looking deeply. The Sanskrit word for mind is chitta, and another word is vritti, which is a wave, the waves of the mind. So when we're thinking, our mind is creating waves in the mind with thoughts. So the stopping and breathing gives the mind a chance to calm down, so that the mind becomes clear, like the water in a pond. When the wind stops, the water becomes calm, and we can see down to the depths of the pond and look deeply. So we're using ourself, we're using our mind to look into ourself. And what do we discover? We don't have to do any original discoveries. I think the Buddha has given us all the map to follow. We look into our body. How is my body today? How do I feel this morning on waking up? Do we have tension, pain? Do I feel relaxed? We can use our mindfulness to be aware of the positions of our body when walking, when sitting. Aware of the internal organs in my body. My stomach okay? Do I have a headache? This is looking into our body. And our body speaks to us with pain sometimes, or with happiness, where we have a lot of energy and feel joyful. The second domain where we look into ourselves is our mind. We become aware of our mind. And the thoughts, emotions, the feelings. And the Buddha said we can be aware of pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling, or feelings that are neutral, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, but I'm okay. So we have our feelings and our emotions. In the depths of our mind are stored all kinds of seeds, potentialities, and they're called bijas, and they are in a resting or sleeping state. However, they're always ready to manifest. They can manifest very quickly, and all they need to manifest any emotion is that we receive some kind of stimulus through our sense organs. Our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, through the body and this sensation of touch, and through the consciousness, the thinking itself. So in the depths of our consciousness are all the possible emotions that we could experience. And when something in the present moment in our environment touches the seeds that are sleeping in the depths of our consciousness, then this seed will manifest. We call it a mental formation. So, for example, we all have the seed of being happy, the seed of happiness, of peace, of compassion, understanding. We have all these seeds. And when we see something or hear something, it can touch the seed of happiness. When we sing songs, as we love to do in Plum Village, it touches the seed of happiness, and the seed will manifest as happiness. But we also have other kinds of seeds. the seeds of sadness, of anger, frustration, jealousy, fear, despair. So when we're in an environment or when we're watching violent movies or we hear arguments or we see something very sad, then what we see or hear will be transferred down to the depths of our consciousness, and then that emotion, that seed, will manifest as the mental formation. So when looking into our mind, we want to be aware of any emotion that's there and also what thoughts we're thinking. And this is possible as we develop our energy of mindfulness. It becomes stronger and stronger, and then we're able to recognize more quickly what is there in our body and mind. And then the other domain is of being aware of what is outside us. Mother Nature, Mother Earth, any object of mind is also something that we can look at deeply. We look in order to understand. And when understanding is there, then more compassion, more acceptance, more tolerance is possible. So these are the 4 aspects of looking deeply that the Buddha gave us. And we've been practicing them for more than 2,600 years. When we look deeply, we notice something else. That one day I feel fine, and the next day I don't feel so good. Impermanence. Everything is changing. In the summer, we see the lotus flowers, and we see impermanence in terms of their blooming. They're tiny buds, and then after a week, they are much larger, and with the warm sunshine, we have beautiful lotus flowers. And then in September, after 3 months of very hot weather, we see the lotus flowers drying up, and then there are just the pods. So when looking deeply, we see change, both in the sense of coming to be, manifestation, lasting for a while, and then the dissolution, the going back to the source. So impermanence is not negative, it's the way things are, constantly changing. When we practice mindful breathing, that's also an experience of impermanence. The in-breath cannot last forever. Isn't that true? It naturally becomes the out-breath. And the out-breath cannot last forever. It naturally becomes the in-breath. So we see change. And we also see that everything needs everything else and relies on everything else to exist. For our life, we need water, we need the sunshine, we need food. Isn't that true? We rely on nature to offer us the substances that are necessary for our life. And in turn, we're now more aware of the need to protect nature, to protect Mother Earth, so this interdependence can continue. We see the bell, this beautiful big bell. Can the bell function as a bell without the bell inviter? I don't think so. Can we hear the bell without someone to invite the bell? I don't think so. So to hear the sound of the bell, we need the bell inviter and the person to invite the bell. Can our sister be a bell inviter if there's no bell? No. Can our sister invite the bell if there's no bell inviter, no wooden inviter? No. Can the bell stay there and still function as a bell without the bell inviter or the person to invite the bell? The bell can stay there hundreds of years, but it won't realize its potential to offer a beautiful sound. So this is interdependence for functioning. Let us all enjoy now the sound of the bell with much gratitude to the three factors that have made the sound possible, and to our ears that are going to receive the sound waves, and to our lungs that are going to bring the oxygen into the body and release the carbon dioxide. How do we feel now? More relaxed? So we can experience in the here and now the benefit of just stopping and breathing. And that is a real gift to our body, to offer this moment of stopping and pausing and breathing. When I spoke about everything needs everything else for its manifestation, I was also talking about emptiness. But emptiness doesn't mean it's not there. What it means is that there's nothing that is unchanging, nothing that is a separate existence that doesn't need everything else. So interbeing and emptiness are very, very similar. We can say the flower is empty of a separate self. The flower could not exist without the earth, the water, the sunshine, the seed, the gardener. So these are aspects of deepening our understanding of life as it is in the very here and now. Everything will change. We all need one another, and that there's no separate existence. And in a sense, everything is empty. It is said that our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our body, and our mind are also empty. How is that possible? This is called the Prajnaparamita, the highest wisdom. I haven't penetrated it yet, I can't tell you. But this much I discovered, a little bit. That in order to taste, I really need to have a clear nose. The nose and the taste are connected. They're not separate self-entities. For example, when I have a cold, I cannot taste the delicious meal. It looks so lovely, but I can't taste it. So the nose and the tongue inter-are. They're not separate self-entities. the other sense organs, how they rely on one another, then you can discover that. And let me know. I'm still looking into that. And there are two basic practices that also help us in stopping our mind, calming our mind. And that is the practice of mindful breathing, which we already have experienced this morning, aware of our breath, following our in-breath and out-breath, and this will give us more concentration by following the length of the in-breath and out-breath. And then being aware of our body as we breathe in, and then relaxing our body as we breathe out. The other basic practice that we learn here and do here at Plum Village is mindful walking. So we know that we're walking all day long. And we bring our attention to the bottom of our feet. And as we walk, we offer our love and compassion to Mother Earth. And this is the moment when we have a connection with Mother Earth. But very often I've heard people say, I can't really concentrate when I'm walking. My mind wanders. I think of this, I think of that, I go to the past, what I should do in the future. Very difficult. So one possibility is we can change our perception of having to concentrate. I don't have to concentrate. But what I can do instead is I'm going to invite my mindfulness to visit my feet. Just visit. We know a visit isn't forever. Do you remember when you visited Grandma and Grandpa? So it was for a certain length of time. And I found this is a much more easy way to look at developing concentration, because it doesn't require a great effort, and it won't require me to be concentrating for a long period of time. I'm going to invite my energy of mindfulness to visit my tongue while I'm eating the food. Just taste it for 20 minutes in silence. That's enough. So my concentration can be developed in the sense of inviting my mindfulness, my awareness, to visit different parts of my body. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that will be easier to think of concentration in terms of bringing your awareness to a place in your body, and we don't expect the concentration to last indefinitely. This is another possibility in terms of developing our capacity to be more mindful and to have more concentration. When we have more experience in looking deeply, we have the capacity to go to the source of understanding. We look deeply into ourselves, into our relationships, to discover, why have I reacted? Why are things not going so well? Why is there suffering? We can also say, I want to look into the happiness in our relationships in terms of the Sangha with your family and friends. That's also going to the source of understanding. So the looking deeply is the prerequisite. It's necessary for the capacity to go to the source of understanding. And going to the source is the understanding itself. And when we have this understanding, then the compassion is there, And that opens the path to acceptance and to love, and to peace and to harmony. So these are practices for our daily relationships. Stopping, looking deeply into emotions, into relationships, going to the source to find why are things this way, and then you will be able to open the path to understanding and love. When we want to live deeply, we ask ourselves, how can I live deeply? I've looked deeply, and now how can I live deeply? For this, I'd like to offer a very short poem written by Basho. He was a Japanese poet who lived in, he was born in 1644 near Kyoto, Japan. And he wrote a very beautiful little poem. Translated into English, it's like this: sitting quietly, doing nothing. Spring comes, and the grass grows by itself. I was deeply touched when I read this poem. Sitting quietly, doing nothing. Spring comes and the grass grows by itself. So we don't have to tell the grass to grow. There is life. And certainly the work coordinator, at least in New Hamlet, she doesn't tell the grass to grow. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe she says, please don't grow, because then we have to cut you before the day of mindfulness. There's no need to force anything. Our practice will develop. Our mindfulness will develop. The grass grows by itself. The grass has confidence and trust in its capacity to just be grass. So we have trust and confidence in our ancestors, in the good seeds in our store consciousness to let us grow and develop into a person with more understanding, more compassion, more tolerance. Sitting quietly. Maybe we remember when Thai would lead us in walking meditation, and he still does from the wheelchair. And at about the halfway mark, then Thai would sit down and just sit quietly. So this is a practice of living deeply. Just sit quietly and do nothing. It gives us an entry into the present moment. Because what sometimes prevents us from living in the present moment is we don't know how to be quiet. We don't know how to do nothing. We're so busy. We're not aware of what is possible when we sit quietly and do nothing. The best place to do this, of course, is in nature, not at work. If you sit quietly and do nothing at your desk, maybe people will not be too happy because you've been hired to do, to produce, to be efficient. And if you decide to come to work and sit quietly and do nothing, you will be happy, I'm sure, relaxed, but your environment may not be. So we want to be aware of the environment. And living deeply lets us have more awareness of the environment. And that's important. Sitting quietly, just following my breath in nature, doing nothing. We can give ourselves these moments. I'm not saying it has to be for the rest of your life, but please consider the possibility of scheduling Okay? Schedule it. Monday, after work, go somewhere, sit quietly, do nothing. Notice spring. Notice the flowers. Notice the grass growing. Because spring has arrived. And in a few days, I've learned that the weather will become very hot. It's predicted 30 degrees, 34 degrees centigrade, so maybe we can say summer has arrived, at least for that day. So spring and summer inter-are sometimes. We can't say that summer won't arrive sooner than June 20th or 21st. And when summer arrives, what are we going to do? We can sit quietly, of course, because it's very hot. It's better to sit quietly, do nothing for a little bit, and then notice. What will we notice at Plum Village? The plums are growing. The grass was growing in spring, but now summer, the plums are growing. And right now they're the size of olives, green olives. And they will continue to grow in summer. So living deeply in the present moment is giving ourselves time to live deeply in the present moment. We don't force the plums to grow. We cannot. But we all hope that they will be ripe and fall from the ground, but not during our lazy day, please. That's the time when the monastics, we have personal time to nourish ourselves, to sit quietly, do nothing. But the plums do arrive during lazy days, so that's fine. We accept the plums being ripe during lazy days and we gather them. And it's very joyful to be together, to gather the plums. We know the plums will be transformed into plum jam, confiture, that maybe you're enjoying the taste of plum jam during breakfast, or the plum jams will be made into dried prunes, another transformation body of plums. And so the continuity of life continues with constant change and transformation. We know now in spring the grass is growing, but the cherries are ripe, the strawberries are ripe. So in spring, all of our sense organs, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our body and our mind have a chance to wake up and to appreciate living in the present moment. And this is life. Life is available. I often would quote André Gide, who said, God is available 24 hours a day, but are we available to God? And Thai would say, life is available 24 hours a day. But are we available to life? So looking deeply, we also know we live deeply, and they're not separate. When we're living deeply, we're looking deeply. They're not separate in time. And when we're looking deeply, we live deeply. When we live deeply, we're looking deeply as well. With our nose, we smell the fragrant hyacinth, the roses, the jasmine. We taste the strawberries, the cherries. We hear the sounds of the birds. At New Hamlet, we have a wonderful sangha of blackbirds. Have you heard the blackbirds singing? I heard the word blackbird. I knew there was such a bird called a blackbird. And I thought, a blackbird, well. But then one day I heard a bird singing. And it was the most amazing sound I had ever heard. And I said, what bird? What bird is singing? Do you know the name of that bird? Someone told me, it's a blackbird. And I said, oh, a blackbird. So the sound, it lasts, it has trills, it goes up and down, it has syncope, it's almost like jazz. It's so, and then I look deeply into a blackbird. The sound penetrates, it's clear, it's loud. And I looked into a blackbird and I said, blackbird, how big are your lungs to be able to make such a sound? And I looked at my lungs, so big, but your lungs are tiny. Birds have lungs, don't they? I hope. I'm talking about bird lungs. So the blackbird has tiny lungs, but the sound is amazing. Yes. So with our ears, we hear so much. And we're living deeply by listening to the sounds of the birds. Soon there will be frogs croaking all night long, keeping you awake if you're in a tent. But the frogs are also wonderful because they jump into the lotus pond and they go plop. And you know, Basho, the Japanese haiku poet, he wrote a haiku poem about a frog jumping into a pond going plop, and that's the most famous poem of the haiku poet Basho. But Basho has written other beautiful haiku poems, and I shared one with you about sitting quietly doing nothing. Spring arrives and the grass grows by itself. So much is new in spring. And we can feel this renewal in ourself. We follow the seasons. So spring is a time for your flower to bloom. The flower of love, appreciation, of happiness, of living in the present moment. We live in the present moment. And the present moment is truly wonderful. So let's enjoy our breathing in this wonderful present moment. And listen to the birds if you can hear. There may be a blackbird out there. So we have experienced moments of happiness, but I'm sure all of us have had moments of suffering or periods of suffering in our lives. And the Buddha was very courageous. I'm sure he had moments of happiness as a young prince living in the palace. He had a wife and a young son. So he was surrounded by everything that we think is necessary to be happy. And yet, he wasn't completely happy. we know that we all carry the seeds of sadness, of despair, of suffering. That in a sense we have created the history of civilizations. There's been war. There is still war now. And these experiences have been transmitted from generation to generation. So we carry within us the potential to suffer. And the Buddha wanted to look deeply into life to see, would it be possible to have more happiness than suffering? What are the causes of this suffering? So he didn't say everything was suffering. No, he said happiness is certainly possible. But the way to have a more lasting happiness is perhaps to traverse, to go through this suffering, to face it, to not run away, to recognize whatever form the suffering takes. Events in our life can lead us to suffering with the loss, death in the family or a beloved one, a loss of employment, separation. So suffering can be also, the Buddha told us, to be with those you don't want to be with. That's suffering. Or to not be with those people you want to be with. That's suffering. And then he looked at the life cycle of a human being. He saw that birth was suffering. Maybe he saw a baby being born and hearing the cry right after. Or he was there when the mother was giving birth. There was pain. Birth is suffering. Illness is suffering. The body has pain. We can't do what we like to do, illness. Whether it's long-term or short-term, there are changes with illness. Old age can be suffering, not necessarily for everyone, and then death. So, death is simply the ceasing to manifest. So he discovered these landmarks in the life of a human being, that these could be causes of suffering. So as practitioners, what shall we do when the weather changes? It may still be spring, but there's suffering or there's depression in ourselves or in loved ones. How can we handle it? Thai has given us some concrete practices to help us with these moments, as well as the Buddha. So the Buddha said, of course, that we should recognize that there is suffering. We don't want to run away from it. Don't try to cover it up. Don't try to escape with consumption. Don't create an embargo, which is being too busy, going to the movies, keeping your mind occupied with too many things. That's the embargo. It doesn't permit anything to come to your awareness. We recognize, okay, suffering is there. Second step, the Buddha said, try to find out why. What are the causes? What's contributing? So we could say suffering is empty. It's made of many elements. And we may not be able to recognize all the elements right at first, but at least we're on the track. We try to see what are some of the reasons. And we can look into our environment. Perhaps we're in an environment where there's a lot of suffering. So our mind receives everything, very open to the environment. The Dhyana master Thang Hoi, the first Dhyana master from Vietnam, who was the first to bring the Buddhist teaching to China. He brought the teachings to southern China. He described the mind. The mind is like an ocean, receiving the water from all the rivers and the streams. It's always open, receiving everything. It rejects nothing. So we know our mind is quite open and sensitive to the environment, external environment as well as our internal environment, the seeds in our store of consciousness. And there's always the interplay of what's happening out there, touching the seeds in my mind, the depth of my mind, the alaya consciousness. Always this interaction happening. So one of the practices, okay, we recognize it, we try to find out the source or some sources, why. If a body is suffering, something I ate. If there's suffering in a relationship, was it something I said? We try to see if a cause rests with me, or at least to what extent I'm contributing to some suffering. In relationships, we have the relationships in our community, where we live with many people, and our guests, you are also living with many people now. And you have roommates, people you've never known, and now you're sharing a room together. So we look deeply to see what's coming up, what's happening. In terms of the seeds in my alaya consciousness. And then we do a practice that Zen Master Thang Hoi recommended, Thai and the Buddha. Zen Master Thang Hoi said, mindfulness of breathing is the great vehicle used by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to save all beings drowning in the ocean of suffering. That's a wonderful description of saying, please come back to yourself and practice mindful breathing. So when we hear the bell, we stop and we come back to ourselves with mindful breathing. And this is the first practice when we're in touch with some suffering in us. We stop, we come back to ourselves and we breathe. But sometimes if the emotion is so strong, it will just trigger the release of the emotion. Maybe if you're sad and if you come back to yourself and you breathe, you'll cry, you'll sob, so you'll feel your sadness even in a deeper way. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not telling you to repress anything. Don't repress your sadness. You've recognized it, you've accepted it, you've embraced it. You're embracing it with your acceptance, and you're doing mindful breathing to try to calm the emotion. But sometimes we need something else, and then this is the mindful walking. So the second practice when there is suffering is to think of right away of walking. And when walking, we don't think. We won't think of the situation that is making us suffer. We won't bring up the image of the person. If a person is bringing suffering, watering our seeds of suffering, we'll simply be aware of our feet touching the earth. We'll bring our awareness and let our awareness visit the feet, and we'll walk until we feel better. Aware of our breathing, offering our sadness to the earth with each step. And maybe we'll walk for 1 hour or less. but it's a practice for transforming the energy of suffering. Thai has also given some other instructions about what to do when suffering is manifesting. He said it depends on the level of your mindfulness, the strength of your mindfulness. If you're beginning and you feel your mindfulness is not strong enough to contain and hold the suffering, Thai recommends just nourish yourself with beauty. And we've seen Thai take people and show them the beautiful flowers. He takes them by the hand and just nourish yourself. Look at some beautiful nature, or read some inspiring poetry, read some of Thai's books, listen to a Dharma talk, listen to some beautiful music, go somewhere in nature. So Thai is saying, substitute something else if your mindfulness is not strong enough and you feel you might be carried away by the feeling of the suffering. They've done some studies with music and the effect of music on the brain, and there's good news that music helps. However, maybe you choose music that is joyful and happy, maybe not the heavy lead stuff, heavy something. I prefer Mozart piano concertos myself. And studies have shown that actually Mozart is very good for depression. Something about the wavelengths. And a very, very recent study has been made available that with Alzheimer's patients, people with early dementia, if they are able to choose music that they like, it doesn't matter what kind of music, and if they listen to music for 10 minutes every day, their brain is being nourished with music they like for 10 minutes every day, they need less medication. For example, they don't need the tranquilizers as much, the anxiolytic. They don't need so many tranquilizers to calm them down. And they don't need so much antipsychotic medication. So it's really helping. And it's very, very promising. I knew I had to give the Dharma talk, so I thought I'll test it. So for 2 days, I listened to Mozart piano concertos for 10 minutes, and I can't tell you what the results are. But I enjoyed listening for 10 minutes. But it's promising, it's good. But I'm not telling you to stop medication if you're taking medication, but talk it over with your doctor. So substitute something wonderful and nourishing if you feel your mindfulness energy can't handle the depth of your suffering. A second thing to do is sometimes we've had traumatic experiences as a child, suffering abuse, verbal abuse, whatever, physical abuse, sexual abuse. Our parents fought, the environment had a lot of suffering. So when these mental formations pop up, they can manifest suddenly. But usually there's some trigger in the environment. But when these experiences come up, what Thai recommends is that you immediately come back to yourself and you breathe and you reassure yourself, everything's okay, I'm breathing, I'm calming, I'm relaxing myself. And we recognize and accept that the suffering is there. And if you can, smile to it. Say, it's okay now. I'm breathing. Look at the environment you're in. I'm with friends. I have a sangha. So when these very, very strong emotions pop up from nowhere, maybe our mindfulness energy is still not strong enough to stay with it too long, but at least we're recognizing, we're embracing it, we're accepting it, and then we practice with it by reassuring our body and mind with mindful breathing and mindful walking that peace and comfort and returning to a zone of safety is possible. Returning to a zone of safety is possible with the practice. So for this, we know that there's the practice of diligence. A seed of suffering has manifested, so we want to help that seed to go back to its sleeping state as soon as possible. So some of the ways of enabling this seed of suffering to go back to its sleeping state as soon as possible is to first calm yourself and then to substitute something else. And you can find what would be very reassuring for you. Listening to music, reading a book of Thai, walking. It's called changing the peg, not letting your mind dwell too long on that topic. So let us enjoy now an opportunity to practice just that. We're just going to come back to ourselves, listen to the bell, breathe, relax, and experience that we can calm and create a zone of safety and peace within ourselves. And our mindful breathing is always available for us. And the third situation can be when we've been practicing long enough and we really want to look deeply into the cause of our suffering. And so we can go back to the past and invite these situations and these memories to come up, and we'll look at them. And we'll look deeply to understand what actually happened. And we can call on others to help us understand as well. Our parents, family members, other people who may have known about a situation of suffering for us. So the more we understand, thanks to our capacity, our strength of mindfulness to hold that suffering, the more we understand, the easier it is to have a feeling of forgiveness, because forgiveness comes with understanding, compassion. It comes slowly, it doesn't happen all at once. So we acknowledge what has happened and the feelings of sadness, despair, or fear, or whatever, hopelessness, yeah. We acknowledge that, but we know that we've been practicing long enough, and we know the practices. We have a Sangha, we hope, and we can be supported in this part of our transformation at the base, at the depths of our alaya, these seeds of suffering. Sometimes we make mistakes in our practice when we begin to practice. We come to the practice and we're new, but we're full of enthusiasm. And we know we have suffering. So we want to transform all of our suffering all at once. So we invite everything to come up all at once. And, our mindfulness is just beginning to develop. So we don't recommend that. Take your time. Take your time with it. Just your mindfulness will grow by itself as the grass grows by itself. But we don't have to push our transformation. It will certainly happen. And when we stay with the practice and we have a Sangha. So we don't recommend looking at all of our suffering all at once with the expectation that we will be happy right away. The third noble truth is that happiness is possible. So it's true, we can be happy. And the Buddha offered 8 ways of practicing to give us ways to restore our happiness. And we know these as the Noble Eightfold Path. We look at our views, our perceptions about people, events, things. We look at our view and accept the truth of impermanence, interbeing, non-self. It's a good view to live with. Thinking, we look at our thoughts. Are we nourishing ourselves with positive thinking? The Buddha said there are 2 kinds of thoughts. And when he was a bodhisattva practicing diligently, he said, there are 2 kinds of thoughts, the wholesome thought and the unwholesome thoughts. And if I think a lot of unwholesome thoughts, that will be my nature. My inclination will be just to think negatively. That will be a habit energy for me. If I constantly think in a negative way, criticizing, blaming, judging, then the Buddha discovered there are wholesome thoughts. And if I think wholesome thoughts, most of the time, more of the time, these thoughts will become my habit energy. I will be able to think in a positive way more easily. However, the Buddha warned us, don't think too much. Because if the mind has to think too much, the body will get tired. And if the body gets tired, the mind cannot concentrate. So this was what the Buddha recommended, to think more positive thoughts, but not too much thinking. So thinking right view, right thinking, right speech, it's very important in our relationships to be able to listen deeply, look deeply, and speak lovingly and kindly. Look deeply at the person and the people you are in relationship with to discover what brings happiness, what waters suffering in people. And then we'll be able to live more deeply with happiness. The mindfulness trainings are there to help us with these practices. The 5 mindfulness trainings, the 14 mindfulness trainings, and then the precepts of the monastics, the 10 novice precepts, 250 precepts for the bhikshus, and 348 for bhikshunis. We hope that interests you for future aspirants. So right thinking, right view, right speech, right thinking, right action. Okay? We want to protect life and try to save the life of the slugs. You see them on the road, and if you don't pick up a slug that's in the middle of the road, if a car comes, it will die. If the car rolls over it. So I practice that. I try to pick up a slug and put it in the grass to try to protect its life. Right livelihood. So anything that will enable you to develop more love, compassion, and understanding can be right livelihood. At least you won't be doing anything to destroy Mother Earth. So we have Mother Earth now in our equation of right livelihood to protect and nourish the happiness of our planet and ourselves. The right diligence, I've spoken a little bit about that. The good seeds we try to water in our mind and help them stay there. And the unwholesome seeds, we try to not let them come up, but if they do, we try to help them go back to the sleeping state. Right mindfulness, right concentration, and right insight, these are the qualities we're developing with our practice all along, every single day, and they develop naturally. Like the soil is nourished by the air and the sunshine and the gardener turning over the soil. So these energies are nourished with our daily practice. As we practice more and more with our aspiration to look deeply, to understand, and to live deeply in the present moment, then we have the capacity to love deeply. And this is a love that we share with all forms of life. We know animals can love. People we can love. And as practitioners, we try to love all forms of life, truly. People, animals, plants, and minerals. And when we receive our mindfulness trainings during the ceremony, we touch the earth with gratitude to these four aspects: our parents, our teachers, our friends, and all forms of life that have helped us along the path of developing understanding, love, and compassion. So we know that the Buddha gave some very beautiful teachings on limitless love. The love that doesn't say, I want you, I'm going to possess you and keep you forever. That's not the kind of love that the Buddha was talking about. And we know that everything is impermanent, so even that aspiration that you have, it may change. But we know there's a place for romantic love in marriages, in the lifestyle of a layperson. For monastics, our career is to develop the four illimitless minds of compassion, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, where we don't have jealousy, and then the love of non-discrimination and inclusiveness. So these are very beautiful qualities that we all develop, the lay friends and monastics together as a sangha. We're walking the path together as a sangha. And I would like to offer now another haiku by Basho, the Japanese poet who lived in, I guess 1644 would be 17th century, near Kyoto. And he said, I believe was very close to Thai. what Thai has been teaching. I don't think he was a monk, but he lived very simply, I believe, and lived deeply and loved deeply. He lived deeply in the present moment. He was able to look deeply. Now here's a little poem I found. He talks to a little butterfly. A butterfly. He says, "Come, butterfly, it's late. We've got miles to go together. Come, butterfly, it's late. We've got miles to go together." Wow. I thought, if I had a butterfly, I would say, "Let's do the Compostelle together. Me and my butterfly, we're going to walk the Compostelle." Yeah. So, little butterfly, it's late. We've got miles to go together. So he had a little friend, a butterfly, and he talked to his butterfly. And he also said something else. He said, "Every day is a journey, and the journey itself is my home." Just like Thai, I have arrived, I am home. The journey itself is my home. My home doesn't have to be somewhere else. It's non-local. Well, it's the journey on the path with each footstep, or the inner journey. The journey itself is my home. Thai has said, "With each step I arrive in the here and now. I have arrived. I am home." So, dear friends, I think our next activity is to enjoy arriving with each footstep, arriving home to ourself, living in the present moment. You can explore what is it to look deeply into your lives, to live deeply your life, and to love deeply in the context of your life, to love in the context of being a bodhisattva, Avalokit, Kiteshvara, Manjushri, Samantabhadra, Kshitigarbha, in the context of wanting to help all beings. And this is something possible because Thai has demonstrated by his life it's possible to look deeply, to live deeply, and to love deeply. So let's enjoy breathing, enjoying each sound of the breath, each sound of the bell, while enjoying our breath. Thank you, Sangha, for being here and for listening.